Today, I'm going to talk about the Double AWP CT-side setups that a lot of teams have been using. It's just something I've been running into during my research a lot, and I saw a game that was like a perfect encapsulation of what I thought was everything was wrong with the Double AWP setup on the CT side if you're not using it like with thought rather than just using it just for the hell of it. So just to put it in a broad context, the double like double op on the CD side, it's very strong in like in the phase one or in like the preemptive like defensive stage. I talked about one or two videos ago, where basically the whole like one of the strong points of this entire setup is that you always have like the chance of getting picks very early on, and then all of a sudden the entire T side falls apart before they even get to do their plan. So they have to rerun their plan whenever they get their guns back, right? And you just win that round, and then you can perhaps snowball from that. But there's a few inherent weaknesses with this setup. Obviously, the first is, do you even have the personnel to do this? And I don't mean like there's a bunch of teams that are just like, oh, you just pick the op, just hold this angle, and press the button. But that's not really what makes it opper. Another obvious weakness is if you just do a very fast or just set up for a good execute onto a site, and then with all the smokes, all the flashes raining down, if that opper isn't that good at it, they'll probably just die as like the five players run up and kill them, and then all of a sudden you have an op on the retake, and that's not very good either. So those are the two main weaknesses. Like, do you even have the personnel? Because I don't think a lot of teams necessarily have the personnel to do it. And then the second thing you have to think about is, do you have a setup, or do you know a way of stopping the execute, which is the natural counter to this like double op? And sometimes teams don't do that either. And then the third weakness obviously is the retake, which is related to the second weakness of the personnel, because there are not that many good oppers that are great on the retake. Like, I can name a few. I think Kenny S is good. I think Oscar's pretty good, but beyond that, there aren't like exceptional players that can retake with the op. And then the final weakness is obviously the economy, and it's like so expensive to get the op. You're not the bonus money you get from kills from the op is negligible, so it's not very good in that sense either. And this is all just in general sense. It's not even that it's always a phase one sort of like preemptive setup. I mean, it usually is, but for instance, if you take like the G2 way of how they do it on Inferno, like they set up shocks on the B side similar to the way Astralis do, and then have Kenny S on A. So it's like a very strong like hard defense, soft defense sort of setup, and with like the phase one thing. So that's why they love going to that, because it fills in like all the roles supposedly of what you would want in a defense. But on the other hand, like if you just think about G2 in general, it's like it just hurts their general game plan. All right, because they have Kenny S, the best operator, so you're already losing money off of the fact that you're force buying a lot, and now you're losing money because you're getting a second op. And finally, the obvious problem is beyond Inferno. I'm not certain like every like plan they have for the double op for all their maps is as good. So what happens is, if for instance somebody like is able to kill Kenny S and take that particular site, shocks on a retake with a rifle is far scarier than shocks on a retake with an op, right? And so that's why I'm not always a huge fan of the double op setup. I will say there are certain teams that can get away with it just because of their personnel, and they shore up those weaknesses. Like Immortals and CLG are both teams that should be running double op as often as they can, as much as they can, because both of their oppers on both teams are all good at like close quarters combat, at retaking, at just fighting at speed, like I don't really know what to call it, but like very mobile opping. And I don't mean like in the device sense where you're like always changing your position. I mean like they're just running around with the op, like run and gun kind of, like they're pretty good at that. And so in that sense, I feel like Immortals and CLG should be running that, and in both teams' cases, because you're running the double op is such like a style that it'll help them like create upsets against better teams, which is things that they both wanted to be doing right now. But in general, like the reason I've been thinking about this is because I was rewatching the North at Starladder Kiev earlier this year, and it's like the perfect example of why you shouldn't run the double op just because you can. And I remember Kerrigan saying something like you don't really want to run the double op. Like he personally doesn't want to run the double op unless like everything else you've tried hasn't worked, and then you just throw them and you look and see what happens, right? Because this is what happens in this North versus like Hellraiser's game on Cash CT side. So on this particular half, everything Hellraisers have been doing has been mostly failing. They tried mid control to A split. They tried A executes. Those didn't work. They're like, okay, let's try to take B control, see if we can get something there. Then config and MSL shut them down there. And then at this point, you're like, okay, so Hellraisers has tried 3 plans. All 3 plans have failed. What is Hellraisers going to do next? And in fact, Hellraisers doesn't do anything next. What happens is North, for whatever reason, decides to go for the double op setup, where they put config on the op on like a secondary op. And this actually runs into Hellraiser's like favor, because Hellraisers after that just keep running A executes, and like North survived the first one because Cajun gets like a 4K on like a retake, but beyond that they just start losing, and then by the time like and then it just keeps happening over and over again, and then by the time like they realize what's up, they have no more money to like change back to their regular setup that was beating everything, and then Hellraisers take the game. So what happened in that half was basically North didn't have any holes in their defense until they created one with the double op setup, and that's why I'm not a huge fan of just doing it for the hell of it, because I feel like it's a very strong setup, but it inherently like puts in like flaws into your defense when you don't necessarily, and that's like okay. I mean there's obvious trade-offs to all setups in that sense, but if you're already running like a close to perfect defense, I don't really see the point in it. All right, those are just my thoughts. See you next time.